This morning we're looking at vision revealed, and we've been talking a little bit about blindness and this concept of not really grasping who Jesus really is. And as we've been talking about the disciples, Jesus was doing incredible things right in front of their eyes, but they just weren't picking it up. Their eyes were blind to the truth of who Jesus is. And the reality is that the disciples aren't alone in this. We all have levels of blindness at times in our lives, or expectations, flawed expectations that we place upon Jesus, and we do the very thing that the disciples did. And so we thought we'd have a bit of time just chatting through what are some of those flawed expectations that maybe we struggle with when it comes to who we see Jesus as and how we see ourselves in the story of God. So why don't we start off with you, Jordan, because you're sitting next to me. Thanks for sitting next to me. It's very special of you.
Putting on deodorant this morning, that's very special of you.
That's all right, it was for my wife. But I'm glad that you can smell it. Your nostrils being revealed there. So, sorry, it's already late. It's too early.
It's day one.
It's day one. What are some of the flawed expectations you've had around in your faith journey?
Yeah. For me, I found myself burnt out, emotionally exhausted, depressed. I stopped doing the things that I like doing. I stopped looking after myself. I stopped prioritizing my relationship with Jesus. And it was because I was too busy doing things for God that I neglected my need to be with God. I was blind to the fact that I was looking for my self-worth in productivity, what I could achieve, what I could do. And if I wasn't able to do and achieve lots, then my mental health would decline. And I realized, frankly, I'm a bit of a workaholic. My tendency is to work and earn my own sense of self-worth. Because I want to do stuff for God, but that's always neglecting my relationship with God. I was working for God in my own strength. That was my flaw. Was my flaw of understanding who Jesus was that I couldn't. Now that I was saved, I thought that I had to do all the work myself. But rather than continually coming back to the gospel, continually coming back to God's grace, and being able to work for God by His grace in His strength rather than through my own strength.
Yeah, it's tricky, isn't it, how we can so easily turn things around to make it about us rather than it being about Jesus. And we do that. You wouldn't have realized early on. It took a long time.
It took me to get to rock bottom until I realized.
So it's something to be aware of, is that we can so easily skew things to make it about us more than it is about Jesus. What about you, Sarah?
Yeah, I guess my story, I'll give you a bit of a context for my experience. So I've had the joy of being raised in a Christian family, so I've heard about Jesus my entire life. And I loved that journey. I was in my early 20s when I was working in a secular job, just earning the coin, and I went on a mission trip to Fiji. And my world was really just like, it was like a mic drop moment for me. It's just like a smack in the face, because here I was working at the Commonwealth Bank, and it's all about the wealth and about worldly stuff. And then I went to Fiji and I experienced people who had nothing from a worldly wealth reality, but they had a joy. And so I'm like, all right, I just want to do ministry from here on in. And I went into started to explore ministry options. And then I found myself going full-time into ministry and just loving that. What I wasn't anticipating was the fact that the moment I stepped into that, there would be hardships of life would actually not be there, but they'd ramp up even more. And I have to say that while I've been in any form of ministry, there's been really tough and difficult times. And I have slipped into the thinking, and this is one of my blindfolds. I have slipped into the thinking, it's like, Lord, you're meant to be good, right? And you're meant to like, why are you hurting me, your person? Why is this happening to me? Like, what else do I have to do? I've given up everything for you. This is my thinking. I've given up everything for you, and yet all of this stuff, all of this hardship, this pain, why is that happening? And I've had to really wrestle with that. There's been times, and I can really, I guess, echo the heart of David in some of the Psalms that he speaks. It's just like, how long is this going to happen? Like, surely you're meant to, like, can't you just look after me? You look after everyone else. Can't you just look after me? I'm your person. I'm doing the work. But I hope, TeenStreet, what you see in that, it's actually me thinking about my immediate need and going, you have to come and look after me now, God, because I've done the hard yards for you. That's not how God operates. He operates in a way that is above us, outside our thinking, outside our understanding. And I've had to come time and time again and humble myself to the Lord. But, sorry, it's still very raw. But it has been the most beautiful experience because he does look after me. He has looked after me. But I've had to get rid of that blindfold that it's just like, come on, God, like, seriously. Everyone else is getting things for them. Like, you are looking after them. Why can't you look after me? But I've had to right-size my thinking. I've had to refocus my vision and remember that in actually my hardships, that's when God has revealed himself the most powerfully and the most amazing. And so while I would not wish the circumstances on anyone, the perspective has been a gift.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. It is interesting, this idea of entitlement, because it does sit in our culture. And so everyone is entitled to something. So it's just how we grow up thinking, if I'm an Australian, I'm entitled to X, Y, and Z. But then we bring that into our Christian walk, and it doesn't matter who we are or what we're doing, we can so easily treat almost Jesus like a genie in a bottle.
Correct.
Or say, I've made a big sacrifice, I'm entitled to a level of comfort, I'm entitled to a break, like whatever it might be. And I think that, it's a very prevalent issue. What about you, Sage? Because have you got a similar sort of issue or struggles along those lines?
Yeah, I think when I'm thinking about, like, when I was in a time of spiritual blindness, I think it was actually back in grade 11. In grade 11, I did go through, like, probably the lowest point in my life. Everything just kind of fell to pieces, and I was like, oh, this kind of sucks. And so in that point, I was like, okay, I need to reach out for something. And I decided to try and reach out for Christianity, but I didn't really decide to go to church or open a Bible necessarily, but I knew kind of, the rules of Christianity, the morals of Christianity, the idea that Jesus loved you. And so I saw it as, like, the Bible as almost this rule book or these guidelines as to, if you follow what it kind of teaches, or what I thought it taught, then you'll have a really great life because of it and everything will be okay, kind of like what you were saying, Sarah. And so I tried that, and then it just kind of started to get really exhausting, and things just were not getting better, and I started to get really confused and conflicted. And it wasn't until I had a friend actually invite me along to a church service, and I started to go to it, that I started to have that sort of blindness pulled away, and I started to see kind of what was really the truth about the Bible, the truth about who Jesus is. And as time went on, I had people come alongside me and invite me to kind of read the Bible with them. I was going along to church and along to different things, and I started to see that, hey, it's not a rule book, but it's actually the window into how we get to learn that we have a relationship with Jesus. There's actually Jesus who comes alongside us in the strife, in the heartbreak, in the struggle, and walks with us, and we grow with him. He helps pick us up time and time again, and we're not doing it alone. And he has all of the grace in the world to go on that journey and grow us into the person that he designed us to be, which is really, really awesome and is in the image of himself. So That's kind of where I started to see that. And when I saw that, I was like, oh my goodness, that is just so much peace. So much peace that it's not me having to work my way up, but it's actually Jesus coming alongside me, doing the work and holding my hand through it all, which was awesome.
It's fascinating how quickly we can miss grace. We miss the truth of the gospel in the way that we live our lives and we embrace our Christianity. So we actually turn Christianity into, again, it's something that's about us. It's about us looking good, us holding it all together, and in some ways we replace Jesus with ourselves. We become the means by which we earn salvation, and it's another struggle that maybe you are battling with, where you've forgotten that it's actually God who saves us through Jesus. It's by His grace that we are saved. And we've turned Christianity into just this moralistic idea of keeping a bunch of rules, tick them off, and you've earned it. And Jesus gets pushed to the background. So thank you, Sage. What about you, Callum?
When Sage was doing the tale of the two Peters, the modern day Peter kind of hit me, and just how he thought that he was kind of good with God. He didn't see what God saw, and he's like, oh, we've gotten a bit of an understanding. And that kind of just hits me because thankfully this is a number of years ago now, but I remember one afternoon I was kind of good with God, right? And I was walking down the street, sun was shining, I had a flat white in my hand, life is good. I was living my best life. And out of nowhere, God just kind of spoke into that, because without realizing it, I was making these kind of snap judgments about the people that were walking down the street that I was on. Like, does that guy really need an exhaust that loud? Or why would anybody own a dog that looked like that? Or whatever. Like just making these like judgment calls. And I had no idea that was happening subconsciously. And God, I didn't see these people the way that God sees them, and God spoke and reached into that situation and pulled back the curtain, and we're like, oh my goodness, God doesn't see these people that way, so why should I not see them? Why should I see them differently? And that was really confronting because I was just doing my thing, but God kind of broke through and kind of realigned my vision of people.
It's so insidious how easy it is to become self-righteous or just proud. Pride is like one of the key ways in which we're blind, isn't it? Like, because you don't, until the veil is pulled back, we don't even know that we're doing it. Pride is one of those things that, I think it's pretty clear in Scripture that every human being struggles with in different ways. And so we need God's help to reveal some of this blindness. What is it that we can't see? Why don't we thank the panel this morning?
Thank you. Keep the chair. Lots of sitting today for you. So in the story of the healing of the blind man, thank you very much, there are 3 stages. It's not an instantaneous healing. There's 3 stages. There's blindness, there is no vision, there is no light getting through there. There is no sight getting through. And then Jesus spits, big logie, and then there is blurred vision. Vision is blurry. There is some light that gets through, but it's not clear. It's not clear. And then Jesus spits again. And then the man has clear vision, complete sight. Everything is clear. There is light that comes through completely, and he's able to see. Thank you, Sage. You can give Sage a round of applause. Thank you. There's these 3 stages: blindness, and we talked about it in our session this morning, where we do not see. There is no understanding of who Jesus is, and as Dan said, the disciples are spiritually blind at this point. In the next section of Mark, which we'll look at tomorrow, Peter states, "You are the Messiah." And this is the point where the disciples receive some spiritual sight. They're not totally blind anymore, but they do not see completely clearly either. That takes us to stage 2, blurred vision. Jesus asks, "Do you see anything?" He looked up and said, "I see people. They look like trees walking around." So the man just sees shapes walking around. There's no clarity. And this is where we can see, but we do not see clearly. There are some misunderstandings around who Jesus is. We can see, but there's some misunderstandings. The disciples had the understanding that Messiah would overthrow Rome. They were preparing themselves for an uprising, expecting Jesus to be this political king. But God had a different plan, and they did not get it yet. In the stage of the blurred vision, the healing has begun, but it's not incomplete. Tim Keller says, "If your God never disagrees with you, you might just be worshipping an idealized version of yourself." So if we think that we've got it all figured out, we think we can see Jesus with perfect clarity, where there is no challenge to our way of life, there's no challenge to our beliefs, and no challenge to the way that we live out our faith, then we have just imagined God to be someone who thinks just like us. It's simply prideful to suggest that we've got perfect vision of Jesus. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't know God accurately. We can. We certainly can know God accurately, but it means that we can't know Him exhaustively. We can't know everything about God yet. For the life of someone who follows Jesus, we are on this journey of seeing Jesus more and more clearly. And this process, the theological term for this process is called sanctification. Can everyone say the word sanctification? Sanctification. So this is whereby we slowly, each day, gain more and more of our spiritual sight. We become more and more like Jesus, and our lives become a better reflection of who Jesus is. See, when Jesus' first attempt at healing the man, when it wasn't complete and instantaneous, did Jesus freak out? He's like, hold on a second, this doesn't usually happen. It's normally instantaneous, I promise. Like, I'm just having an off day, I'm just a little dehydrated, I didn't get the consistency of spit right. Did he freak out? No. Jesus knew that this kind of healing involved 2 stages. It was gradual. The complete healing was never in doubt. It was simply a gradual process. In the same way, Jesus doesn't freak out when we don't have it all figured out, so neither should we. So just because our healing is incomplete does not mean it is in doubt. Just because our healing is incomplete, it does not mean we will not get complete healing. Philippians 1:6 says, "He who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus." God promises this to you and to me, that He will complete the healing. And He asks us to trust Him. He leads us by the hand and begins the healing process. But too often we're impatient. Aren't we just so used to just getting what we want whenever we want it? And we find it hard not to doubt. And that brings us to our final stage, though. Clear vision. Verse 25, once more, Jesus put his hands on the man's eyes. Then his eyes were opened, his sight was restored, and he saw everything clearly. His sight was restored. He could see clearly now. This is where there is complete spiritual understanding. And the words everything clearly is really emphasized here. They see the whole picture now. It all makes sense. And this stage, spiritually, is heaven. We won't see Jesus with full clarity until the day we die or until Jesus returns. That's when the healing is complete. And the process of sanctification is then complete. God has carried out the good work in you and finished it. But now we wait. We do not wait passively or without meaning or without purpose, but we wait on Jesus that we might see him more clearly. And our world we live in is in darkness, and it too needs its sight restored. Our healing is incomplete, but it does not mean it is in doubt, because Jesus is faithful to his promises.
When we go out for dinner somewhere to visit someone, I plug in to our phone, our Google Maps, where to go. And that's just how we get around. There was a time where there was a book called a Refidex. You probably never heard of that, but it was a thing where you'd get a map out. Now we just have to type in the address to our location where we're heading, and it will show us how to get there. And after we've been at this place, possibly normally for the first time, something comes over me. It's happened in the past where I get in the car and we're ready to leave, and just a wave of confidence comes upon me. And I just don't think we need to use Google Maps to get home. And so I just start to drive. I follow my nose, my instincts. And I'm just going to back it, because I have this ability in that moment to work out how to get home. And as we drive, we notice that there's unfamiliar territory, and it's getting darker, and I don't know where we are until we come to a dead-end cul-de-sac, and we have to stop, and we have to get Google Maps out, and we need to find our way back. And it's going to take us even longer to get home now, because in my pride, in my self-confidence, I blindly went in the direction that I thought it was, but I was in fact wrong. And that's what pride does. That's what blindness does. We are convinced that we've got it all together. We are convinced that we've got it right, but we are in fact heading in the wrong direction, and we need to have a correction come into our lives. And pride is particularly devastating because it elevates us so that we don't think that we need the help of others. I've got it all together. I can just do this thing called life myself. And so I'm just going to keep plowing ahead in my own strength, in my own confidence. And more importantly, we don't think we need God. Pride makes us blind. It's essentially saying to Jesus, I got this, and I'll take it from here. I'm good at this whole life thing. And then as we take the steering wheel of our lives and we drive into the night, which gets darker and darker, we don't realize it, but we're blind. And this is essentially what happened in the Garden of Eden. Adam and Eve knew what was right. God had given them a lane to stay in. He said, you can eat of any tree in this garden except that one tree, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And they went ahead and they ate from that tree. They were saying, no thanks, I'm going to do life my way. I'm going to be Lord of my life. I'm going to take charge. I'm going to take the steering wheel. And this goes to the heart of what sin is. It's direct rebellion against God, and it blinds us to the truth and reality. So what do we do to be cured of this blindness? What do we do to get the car back on track, heading in the right direction? Well, the first step is to recognize there's a problem. Now that seems crazy simple, but this is the mystery of what it means to walk with Jesus, is that we need to recognize we need help. We need to recognize that there is something wrong. And so many people don't get this. They miss this step. They just think everything's fine. They're nailing it at life. But until we stop and realize we've lost our way and there's a level of blindness, then we will just keep fumbling our way forward. But there is good news for those willing to hear it. Remember what we reflected on last night. God is a God who reveals himself. He didn't stay far off. After we rebelled in the Garden of Eden, he continued to come close. We know from the story of Abraham, he comes and chooses Abraham and reveals himself to Abraham and to Isaac and Jacob and to Moses, and then to the people of Israel at Mount Sinai. And through the Bible, we know that God is the God who reveals himself, and he has ultimately revealed himself in Jesus. Jesus is the ultimate revelation of God. God has revealed himself. Then the question is, are we willing to humble ourselves and seek him? When we seek him, we're saying, I need help. Has anyone had to call out when they've been at the beach and got stuck in a rip? Anyone had to put their hand up and say, hey, I need help? Yeah, a few people. That's essentially what's happening to us as we recognize there's blindness. We're putting our hand up and saying, I thought I could do life myself, but I need help. I've made some mistakes. I haven't got it all together. I need Jesus. When Jesus began preaching one of the most famous sermons in the world, it's called the Sermon on the Mount. It's in Matthew chapter 5. It's incredible. Guess how he started the sermon? If you're going to preach a big sermon, he goes, blessed are the awesome at doing life and those who nail it at life. Is that what he says? What does he say? He said, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. What a strange way to begin a sermon. Imagine someone beginning a TED talk, saying, you're winning if you're spiritually poor and you mourn. People would be like, what is he talking about? You're winning. You're actually, your way into the kingdom is through recognizing that you are spiritually bankrupt. You don't have it all together, and until you recognize that you are spiritually poor, then you don't think you need a savior. Just like those people in the ocean when they get stuck in the car and a proud person says, I'm just going to work my way out of this, and they get further and further stuck, and tragically that's how people drown. But when we recognize that we are poor in spirit, that we can't save ourselves, then we reach out to Jesus and we're saying, I can't do this, I need him. TeenStreet, it's only then when we recognize our spiritual poverty, and when it says that word mourn, blessed are those who mourn, we're mourning the reality of sin, the reality of the deep brokenness that sin has caused, and that we're not satisfied with it. We're not just going to continue down this pathway. We're going to grieve this, and we're going to press into what God has given us in Jesus. We live in a world that says fake it till you make it. Just make it look like you've got it together, but this doesn't actually fix anything. It's like putting a Band-Aid on a snake bite. You don't do that. You don't want to just conceal it superficially. We need to press into the reality that we don't have it all together. And I think we recognize this, but we need to actually own it and say, I need Jesus. We need to seek him. We need to humble him. In the book of Zephaniah, chapter 2, the prophet Zephaniah was warning of coming judgment on the nations of the world who arrogantly worshipped other gods. And God says to them, seek the Lord, all you humble of the land who do his just commands, seek righteousness, seek humility. And we need to remember that humility, this is all part of it. Seeking God is that waving the hand and saying, I can't do this, I need help. We're humbling ourselves and we're asking God to be gracious to us, to be merciful to us. And TeenStreet, this morning, I want you to know that God isn't far off. Just as we talked, the point last night for us that we're trying to make is that God is a God who reveals himself, and he loves revealing himself. And God isn't far off, like a distant island with a lighthouse on it that you can see, and he's always far off, but God wants to be close to you. And if we seek him, you will find, that is the promise. When we recognize that we can't do it in our own strength, when we humble ourselves and we say, I'm spiritually poor, I can't do this, I'm going to cry out to God for help. The promise is, seek the Lord, all you humble of the land. Seek righteousness and seek humility. Seek and you will find me. In Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 13, it says, but you will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. And Jesus says in Matthew 7, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and it will be open to you. You might be thinking this morning, I'm too messed up. God doesn't want to reveal himself to me. I've tried, but that's not true. God wants to reveal himself to you, TeenStreet.